Hello and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor, and with me, as always, it's Phil.
Hello?
Phil, what a lineup of fights we have to talk about today. I don't know why I started. I don't want to. I started with a tone like I was being sarcastically overpraising of the card. But neither do I think it's not amazing, it's not terrible, it's a pay-per-view. It's good enough. I'll take it.
It is technically a pay-per-view, yes. I mean, it's one of the ones where I think it's passing the boundaries. It's not just a fight night card with like relatively famous people tacked onto the top. They haven't at least made some effort. And I think, yes, this is due to the current slight shift we've seen in the way that they've been booking these kind of things, where they do seem to be trying to make an effort for the events which are meant to be meaningful, the numbered ones, and the travel cards and so on. That, the UFC clearly wants to sell something at the moment, and it's trying to put its best foot forward as it is. That being said, it's not exactly stacked, but it's simply like, as I said, it qualifies as a pay-per-view.
Acceptable pay-per-view. I would say it has at least 5 good fights on it. Which is not to say that they're all, like 5 relevant, interesting fights, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I was looking at it, I was like, I don't know how many of these fights are going to be good.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. I mean, look, last weekend's card did not end up being entertaining. In fact, it was a terrible weekend for combat sports in general, because there was like the whole weekend of boxing events, and up until Naoya Inoue fought, which, thank God, the man's incapable of having a boring fight, but they were, I didn't even watch them all. They were apparently abysmal as well. So even when there is a card like last week's where it's like, I know a lot of these names, this is an interesting matchup, it doesn't necessarily yield good fights. But all we can care about from the perspective of this card's coming up next weekend is, do I care? And the fights would not have been so brutally disappointing if we didn't care about any of them. So even that is a reflection of the UFC sort of trying with the matchmaking here. And, I'm okay with this as a pay-per-view card. It's UFC 315, of course. The main event, welterweight champion Belal Muhammad defending against Jack Della Maddalena, everyone's new favorite action fighter. In the co-main event, the vile Valentina Shevchenko is defending against the French Manon Fiorot. And there's some other stuff here, too. Ayman Zahabi has been having an incredible run, which I still can't really find it in myself to logically explain why he's doing so well. He's fighting former featherweight king Jose Aldo, which should be interesting at the very least. And then further down on the main card, we have former flyweight champ Alexa Grasso facing very likely future title challenger Natalia Silva. All of these, I think, are at least moderately interesting, well-made fights. I'll take it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any of them which combine, like, relevance with being, like, a guaranteed barn burner.
Right.
I mean, and I say, like, guaranteed barn burner, even though that's not necessarily what you always get, but, like, Santhagen Figueiredo is about as, that is both guaranteed action and people that I care about. None of these are exactly that.
Yeah.
They're just, they are people that I care about, but I'm not necessarily expecting this to be, like, a super thrilling pay-per-view.
No, not necessarily, but I care. And at least, I mean, even Santhagen Figueiredo was still a compelling main event, interesting to watch, but for Davison Figueiredo's part, I'm not sure that was exactly the performance you were hoping to see when you got excited about that matchup, was it?
No, but at least, that's the floor for how boring a Figueiredo-Santhagen fight could be.
Yeah, absolutely. Is one guy just showing up looking like shit and the other guy eviscerating him. So, Yeah, we will, I think, try to get to at least 2 of the fights from last weekend's card. They may end up being bonus material. By the way, we dropped a big bonus episode, which was not only about various undercard fights, but our apparently shared hatred of Jelly Roll and modern music on the Patreon last week. So if you haven't heard that one, go check that out. Patreon.com/heavyhands. But let's talk about UFC 315's main event now. Belal Muhammad versus Jack Della Maddalena. And this is a title fight. It is also of its time, is it not?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I'm still not sure how much I trust Belal Muhammad as a reigning champion. This is the era of Dricus. And I think Belal Muhammad is so much smarter than all the other Dricuses. But he's also, definitely not Dricus in the one way that really matters for Dricus himself, right?
Being giant and physically overwhelming.
Right. So he does still feel in some way like one of these champions that I'm like, are we sure this guy's the best in the division? I'm not sure. I love him, of course. I've been a fan for a long time, but it does feel, this is the division that GSP used to be champion of,
Yeah. I mean, it's a different division to what it was back then. Yeah. But more than that, I feel like the question is less like, is Belal really the champion? And honestly, it's like, does Jack Della Maddalena, is he really like the number one contender at this point? I mean, because obviously,
yeah,
in one way, obviously no, it isn't.
Right.
It's Shavkat. And it was also, it would have been Khamzat if he hadn't gotten too big for the division and thankfully gone up to middleweight. Which I think a lot of us expected him to for a very long time. But yeah, I mean, so Della Maddalena has not fought for that. He hasn't fought for a while. Mm-hmm. His last win was over a year ago. It was that Gilbert Burns win. It didn't look great.
Mm-hmm.
Gilbert Burns since then has not looked great.
Also,
I
Della Maddalena's fight before that, he didn't look particularly great. Excuse me, the one before that when he fought Bas El Hafez. He looked fine against Kevin Holland. He also, and I think this was largely a style matchup thing. It is funny to consider that like Rainier de Ridder ran through Kevin Holland and Jack Della Maddalena dragged him to a close decision. But
yes.
He's not going to do what de Ridder did to Holland anyway. So it's not necessarily a 1-to-1 comparison, but yeah, that's part of it as well, that I'm not fully sold on Jack Della Maddalena as the worthiest challenger in this division.
I mean, even, Sean Brady recently beat Gilbert Burns, and he's also finished Leon Edwards. Even Ian Gary in his last fight has maybe like more modern relevant claims to wins than Della Maddalena. So I think, Maddalena is definitely a sort of right place, right time kind of challenger where he's the kind of person that the UFC want to see in title fights. And, there's no one else who's quite in the right place.
Yeah. And I can appreciate on that level too. I mean, I like watching Della Maddalena fight. He's a hell of a lot of fun. So I get that. But it is it's a peculiar matchup for those reasons, that Belal Muhammad is a peculiar champion and Jack Della Maddalena is pretty clearly not the best challenger in the division.
Yep. That being said, still hasn't lost.
That's true. He's came close. He's had some pretty ugly close wins, but he has not lost. So, what do you make of the matchup? I mean, this stands to be a very obvious kind of style clash of a classic MMA variety, in that Della Maddalena is not a wrestler. Belal Muhammad very much is. Do you expect that to be the key factor here, as I kind of do?
Yeah, and it's not even just the the broad style matchup. It's the fact that like Della Maddalena's path to the championship has looked a lot like Leon Edwards, not from a skill set perspective, but just from a controlling the fight perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's winning these fights. I don't think there's ever been much of a case that he hasn't won them.
Mm-hmm.
Much like Leon Edwards, he's not winning through close decisions or getting robberies or anything like that. He's definitely, most of the time he's finishing people. There's no question that he's winning. But in almost every fight, there's a point where you're like, huh? Where he's just not controlling the fight as he, either wants to or should. And it gets sloppy and it gets messy and he has to bring it back in one way or another. Randy Brown kind of tuning him up a bit and then gets pushed into the fence and dies. Basil Hafez, just like a mess all over the place.
Yep.
I mean, Kevin Holland, again, like the fact that this is a split decision was stupid. And that wasn't close to being a split decision, but it certainly was competitive.
Yeah. And again, I'll reiterate, it was the kind of style matchup in which Kevin Holland on a good night should be competitive. So even that is not as big a knock on Della Maddalena as it might seem, comparing it to some of Kevin Holland's other completely lopsided losses. He just wasn't going to beat him that way.
And then the Gilbert Burns fight, once again, it's kind of a mess. He's getting taken down. He's sort of seeming to lose control of the fight a bit, and then this gas is out, and then Maddalena hits him with a huge burst of offense and finishes the fight.
Yeah. And it's not like that kind of fighter can't become a champion, or even reign as a champion. Charles Oliveira was a champion in a better division than this. For multiple fights. Robbie Lawler was champion in this division. That describes a lot of his fights where he was not able to actually keep a lid on it. So this isn't to say that he's doomed, but it doesn't feel like what we usually associate with a championship style. Because what we usually expect to see from viable challengers to a title is that word that you uttered several times, control. The ability to win a fight even if the finish does not present itself convincingly. And these haven't all been finishes, but they still have the feeling of a finisher sort of barely hanging on due to his finishing chances rather than actually shutting down an opponent.
Yeah, I feel someone who is trying to win the fight rather than, walk away with a decision that's been achieved in the most functional way possible. And this is why I kind of compare him to Leon Edwards, because Leon Edwards has a very different skill set, a very different approach that he takes.
Mm-hmm.
But he also seemed constantly at risk of losing control of his fights. And that, all it took for that risk to become absolutely chaotic was someone to push him into that kind of situation where he's, the fight's going badly for him, and then simply sit there forever. Which is what both Bilal Ramadaneh Muhammad and Sean Brady did.
Mm-hmm.
Is that they just forced him into his situations where he's sort of lost control of the fight, and they simply didn't get it back again. And I am unsure that someone cannot do this to Maddalena.
Right.
Because people were able, you mentioned Robbie Lawler, people were able to do that to Robbie, and it is notable that his title run did not really consist of anyone who was able to do that, who was able to just keep a consistent pace, what Robbie Lawler didn't like, and then just keep doing it forever.
Right.
His best fights were characterized by being against Hendricks, who was exactly the same kind of guy, just for slightly different reasons.
Right.
So you had these, very punctuated fights where one guy was, and the other guy was, recharging his mental batteries, and then they take turns doing that. It was very competitive and so on, but there was no just monotonous, high-paced smothering going on.
Right.
As, Robbie Lawler basically lost to in his entire career. And Robbie Lawler just historically never beat that kind of opponent, someone who could just sit outside his comfort zone and just stay there forever.
Right.
And I'm convinced that Jack Della Maddalena isn't also someone like that.
Basically, he seems eminently game plannable.
Yeah. And also, I'll remember the name Mohammed is one of the greatest game planners we've ever seen.
Yes.
And one who has specifically demonstrated that against that kind of opponent, he can make the right adjustments and, sit on them forever. It's exactly what he did against Leon Edwards. He knew he had to push him backwards. He had to stay on top of him the whole time. He had to get him resetting and then take advantage. And that's what he did. And aside from a few sort of key elements, which I think Maddalena makes it interesting through, which are basically that he's a southpaw, and that he's a southpaw of a type which I don't think Bilal has really encountered much.
Yeah.
In that he's got a very educated lead hand,
Mm-hmm.
and he works off it. And he's essentially a lot more functional in the pocket than Leon Edwards is, so it's less of a safety zone than that Bilal can just barge into.
Right.
And just, the sheer potency that he offers. Aside from these factors, I don't really see why Bilal just won't understand that he just has to go after him and stay on him. Just do what Basil Hafez or Gilbert did, but just simply don't let up and don't guess out.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. A couple points there, actually, that if we're going to approach this from the perspective of let's figure out how to game plan for this guy we've just described as very game plan susceptible, does Della Maddalena, like a lot of aggressive fighters, it does seem like pressure would be a great way to approach him, right? But broadly speaking, there are two ways that you can approach a fighter like Della Maddalena. You can say, I'm going to do Ian Gary. I'm going to move around and make him reset his feet as much as possible, make him chase me and find my opportunities that way, or I'm going to break his will and make him uncomfortable by forcing the kind of fight he wants to put on me on him. I'm not certain that this is one of those fights where Bilal is going to make the pressure read. I think of matchups like Vicente Luque. Luque looks like another guy where probably putting him on the back foot is just always a good idea because it's never where he wants to take the fight. And Bilal had a very flighty, evasive movement, long range kind of approach to Vicente Luque. Likewise, in large part against Gilbert Burns, who, aside from everything else and all of the other bad qualities he showed in that fight, is a big puncher. And yeah, Bilal chose to fight him from a pretty safe distance and be quite measured. He did try to pressure the hell out of Leon both times that he fought him. But I think there's something in Leon which tells a fighter like Bilal, this is a guy who is just going to give you initiative, right? If you can get him reacting, you can get him on the back foot, and he is going to start waiting for his moment and allow you to start connecting the pieces to grab one tempo and build three more on top of it. And I don't know if Bilal will make that calculation against Della Maddalena. This is just a sort of gut feeling I have based on all of his past performances, but there's certain guys he regards as, I think, too dangerous to trade bricks with in the pocket. And I think Della Maddalena is self-evidently that kind of guy. He doesn't, you can do all the same building block work with the jab and the feints and the pressuring footwork that worked against Leon, but the margins are much thinner, because even in sequences where you have gained an initiative, you are getting him to react, you're even succeeding, he might just eat the shot and give you one back. That's something that Leon categorically kind of doesn't want to do.
Yep.
You know, Leon is a guy, once you get your foot in the door, you can kind of, aside from the couple of moments where his rage meter builds up and he decides to, and it's usually like at the start of a round, you'll crush him for a whole round, and then the next round he'll come out all heated and try to change your mind. But even then, you can just start the process over with Leon. Della Maddalena is always going to be down to scrap. So I think it will probably, I'm kind of expecting Bilal to allow Della Maddalena to pressure a bit here. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, yeah. Again, the thing about Della Maddalena is that he's, as you mentioned, hasn't proven to be particularly, adept at dealing with either game plan. You know,
right.
Essentially the issues with moving away from him is that you can trap yourself on the fence and then he can kill you. But yeah, it's the main issue with him is that, yes, in the moments where you are standing in front of him, he is an incredibly dangerous, potent pocket striker. But yeah, no, that could well be true. Yeah, I think looking back at that Luque fight could be very illustrative. I think the question there is, does Muhammad throw as much as he did in that fight?
Yeah.
Because yeah, a big part of that was him he just spammed punches at Luque whenever he got near him.
Yeah, and body kicks, which definitely work well against Della Maddalena. Gilbert Burns, for example, had a lot of success with his body kicks. I remember the lateral movement kicking game was also a big part of Muhammad's fight with Luque. Yeah, I'm not saying, by the way, that I think these are two viable ways to approach a pressure fighter who's dangerous in the pocket. And it really depends on which approach you feel more comfortable with, which is more natural to you. But it's just as viable a way to beat a guy like Della Maddalena. But it poses the risk of allowing him to get a lot more comfortable, of making it harder, perhaps to, if not, I imagine if Bilal plays that kind of fight, he will probably hit some surprising takedowns, sort of on the counter. But if you allow a guy to pressure, those tend to kind of be harder to come by as the fight goes on. I mean, it's just not there's a reason wrestlers don't tend to like to back up, right? It's a lot easier to set somebody up for a shot if you're the one moving forward, because it's a big compound kind of movement. It's the kind of thing your timing has to be absolutely perfect, or you need to have a really sophisticated idea of how to follow up once you connect and finish the takedown in some way other than off the initial shot. It just makes it more complicated. But still, it's not like it's a kind of fight that wouldn't possibly work against Della Maddalena. I think there's even some logic to it because, like I said, you can build the exact same kinds of attacks if you put him on the back foot that you did against Leon Edwards, and you probably have a much easier time actually hitting him and using that momentary shock to set up takedowns or whatever. But he will just be ready to sling shots back at you when you're in his grill in a way that Leon Edwards never is.
Yeah. So yeah, my other question is, how do we feel about Bilal against southpaws nowadays?
Yeah. historically.
He was much better against Edwards, like just in terms of how he was working.
Yeah.
He was just constantly jabbing. He was hooking off Edwards' jab, and countering the jab, like jabbing as like the lead uppercut as well. Like it was just like a big lead hand performance from him, and for someone where that's like traditionally been their best. That's traditionally been their best weapon, which has then just disappeared when they've been fighting southpaws. So that was really good to see from him. So I do find myself thinking that, like, I'm now more convinced that Dahl can use his entire game against southpaws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. There's still a little niggling doubt in my mind that, like, how much of this is just he had fully figured out how to play the game against Leon Edwards.
Yeah.
Who's, again, like, just as straightforward to game plan against, but in a very real way, like, kind of a lot less unpredictable once the momentum starts rolling than Della Maddalena.
I mean, again, we didn't really know that until
it's true.
Bilal did it.
It's true. That's true.
Because he didn't have any losing fights that were like that, really. Maybe Usman won.
Yeah, they were mostly shocking moments
just
late in a fight rather than somebody just completely shutting him down. Yeah, it's you're right. It's much easier to say in hindsight that those elements were always there.
Yeah, because I'm just comparing him to Maddalena from a skill for skill perspective. You're just like he's just got a much broader skill set.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Submission grappling. He's obviously a much better offensive and defensive wrestler, frankly. Yeah. At least he was. He looked pretty terrible against Sean Brady, but yes, just as saying both fighters at their peak, he's just a broader, if not deeper, fighter than Maddalena.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me it does just look like a game plannable opponent with a single major offensive threat. But he might land. Bilal he's not immortal. He's been knocked out before.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's hard for me, and Maddalena's also he's adaptable in that kind of tactical Carlos Prates kind of way. He's just a natural fighter,
right? And
he just can find the finish, and he works the body, and can be, as you said, like when he's in pocket exchanges, he's extremely crafty.
Yep.
And he looks like a high level boxer.
Yep.
But yeah, outside of that, and it's obviously Bilal's job to keep it outside of that kind of fight for as much as possible. He just tends to have extremely ragged fights.
Yep.
And yeah, so it does feel like another one of those ones like Prates or Figueiredo, where you're just like, sure, he's got the opportunity to make this happen. I can't really see how he does it. And if he does it, it's going to happen in an extremely sort of organic, he's just going to find the shot kind of way.
Yep. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because I fully agree, and that does not make me overwhelmingly confident still in Bilal's chances of shutting him down. Like this is the drawback of not having that next step of athletic ability, right? That like there is just always less margin for error for Bilal. That like if he gets badly hurt and thrown on the back foot and then he shoots like a slightly panicked takedown that just fails, what position does that put him in? Like, how survivable is he if he gets into trouble against somebody who's so dangerous on the feet? Because he doesn't have, he can't just turn on the jets, and be like, okay, blast double. I'm going to do nothing but hold you down for the rest of this round for free. I don't know. I do still feel
he just, he he gets buzzed and panic shoots, and Maddalena throws a counter. I mean, Mohammed he's like 25% head.
Yeah.
How's that even going to miss?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Could be the most inaccurate counter knee of all time and still probably clip some quadrant of Bilal's chin. Yeah. I am still inclined to take the champion here to defend. I just think there are many, many areas in which Belal has a lot of resources that aren't the pocket. And there are a lot of ways for him to use the dangerous moments in the pocket to his advantage to set up some kind of transition. But I have my fears that Della Maddalena is just one of those fighters who really is never completely out of the fight. And that's a tough kind of guy to effectively keep a lid on. He just always has the chance to turn everything around in one moment. But I'll take
feel
Belal.
like, it's one I can see happening, but not one I can pick, especially when I don't really it's been so long since Belal's had fights where things have really gotten out of control for him.
It's true. Not since that first Leon Edwards fight, I suppose.
Yeah. That could be put down to him just struggling to start, and, he was up against a southpaw and he still sucked against them and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I mean, if you're going back to, fights that he actually, straight up lost, you'd have to go back to Jeff Neal in 2019. But, yeah, he's just been very, very good at controlling people, even when they are, even when they do have physical advantages over him.
Yeah.
And even when they are very, very dangerous. I got to pick him. But yeah, Maddalena, a very potent man.
Certainly, yeah. It's helpful, right, that he there are parts of the game that he kind of sucks at too. That's a boon for a guy like Belal. Imagine if it was I think Jeff Neal might still be a difficult fight for Belal just because the opportunities to wrestle aren't so obvious, If he ever somehow got himself to a title shot, he might prove to still be quite a difficult fight for the champion. But at least Della Maddalena has glaring weaknesses. Well, I think that'll do it for the main event of UFC 315. Next up, of course, we had Giga Chikadze a few weeks ago. Now it's my turn. Valentina Shevchenko is fighting Manon Fiorot in defense of her women's flyweight throne. We'll talk about that and the rest of the good fights on this card after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
I don't know about Manon Fiorot, man. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't know what I'm looking at. I mean, I do, because it's a very straightforward kind of fighter archetype, but just don't know, man.
Is it good?
Is it good? What's the basement for good in this division?
Yeah.
Is this it? It might be.
What does good mean in this division? Valentina Shevchenko has ruled over this division with an iron fist for a decade. Does that mean the division's good? I've kind of assumed the opposite.
I think it does mean the opposite. Yes. Yeah. So I find myself looking at Manon Fiorot, and I'm like, you have a bunch of useful traits that have been welded together into a functional framework. And then the question is, like, does this assemblage deserve to beat what is perhaps the most accomplished and successful women's mixed martial arts champion of all time?
I'm sorry, Phil. You said women's mixed martial arts champion. I think you meant to say human being.
Sorry, and complete human being.
It's an understandable mistake. Just don't let it happen again.
And then I honestly just find myself looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, maybe.
Right?
Maybe just being real big. Maybe just being real big is enough.
And I think that is a primary factor behind Fiorot's success, honestly. She is very big. She has very long reach for this division. She has a game which takes advantage of that. You know, Shevchenko did manage to beat the first Holly Holm. So there's that. But what if...
That is true. She's beaten the bad big Holly Holm.
Even bigger, but worse.
Yes. The proportionally bigger one for her weight class, but the one who is actually smaller and more skilled.
Yeah. And the one who, like, very regularly lands punches on the faces of her opponents. You know, sometimes without even uttering a sound to let the audience know that that's what she's trying to do. No, Fiorot also does a lot of ki-eyeing, let's be honest.
Yeah. But at least, as you said, it's accompanied by strikes which land.
Yes, by impacts. Yeah, it's, and this is the trouble, with trying to, I mean, it's become quite easy to just forecast defeat for Shevchenko's opponents. But in trying to figure out, like, what are they even going to think of to approach her? What does their style look like against her? There are no parallels. There just aren't any. Because nobody else fights like Valentina.
Mm-hmm.
You know, few other female fighters in the UFC are capable of fighting like Valentina. They do not have her speed or her striking skill or her well-roundedness. But also, literally no one has her sort of mental approach to the game, which is an ironclad insistence on keeping you at a distance where you are ineffective and forcing you to close that distance recklessly and finding opportunities off of that. No one else plays that game. And so Fiorot has not faced anybody like it. I mean, I'm trawling through her UFC record, like, who's somebody who can give me who's like an instructive performance, and I know what to expect from her here. Is it like Rose Namajunas?
It's Namajunas is the closest person you're going to get.
Yeah. Right? And Rose is nothing like Valentina, really. I mean, there's a couple, she's fast, she's powerful, you know, but she doesn't play Valentina's game. Valentina truly does not give a shit if the fight sucks. That's a superpower of hers. She feels she has so little connection to normal human beings that she feels none of the social pressure that normal fighters experience to make the fight fun. All she cares about is winning. And she knows the best way to do that is to never deviate unless you absolutely have to. Stick to the plan. And the plan is always the same. Keep them at range.
I mean, this is an excellent argument for the corrosive nature of social media and what it does to fighters. Because Valentina never has to go online or, you know, whatever, look after a fight and see people telling her how boring it was and how much it sucked. Because it's all she has to see is tons of people telling her what a beautiful, sexy spy she is and how gorgeous her toes are.
Yeah. They are right. My toes are gorgeous.
But yeah, so my personal feeling is that Fiorot could be a terrible matchup for Shevchenko in more ways than one. Yeah, one in that it would be a fight that would suck, but that's, I guess, not particularly outrageous or weird.
No.
But also, yeah, is that Shevchenko wants to hold that slice of range where she's, able to step back and either counter or just threaten a counter and then regain it. She wants that slice of range, and that slice of range is very difficult to hold against people who are big. And the obvious reference for this is her absolutely dreadful rematch with Amanda Nunes.
Yeah.
Where they just sort of looked at each other, and then occasionally Nunes would try and throw a left hand or a snap kick to the body. It probably wouldn't work.
Yep.
And then sometimes it would. And I guess maybe she won that fight. Who knows? So yeah, that's one negative thing to hold about this.
Powerless sidekick versus powerless lead leg kick. Who will win?
Yeah. Yeah, and were I to think of this as being that kind of situation, I might actually seriously be tempted to pick Fiorot simply because, yeah, she's big. I know that she can hit a pace.
Yep.
And that she's actually quite difficult to dissuade from it.
Yep.
And, I'm not sure how much an aging Shevchenko would stop her from simply standing at distance and just thumping in the odd jab or whatever. But then I think about the incredible evolution of Valentina Shevchenko. And I think about Grasso 3. Because what did we see from that fight?
Mm-hmm.
We saw a Valentina Shevchenko who had learned entries.
Mm-hmm.
That she was actually, coming in, slipping her head off the side, looking to counter under the jab on the way in, and then, either throwing a punch or hitting a takedown.
Mm-hmm.
And she was being a tiny bit more assertive in the pocket, and this completely destroyed Alexa Grasso because it was something that simply hadn't been present in her game until then. So, and yeah, the problem with Fiorot is that, like many tall fighters, she is colossally dependent on her reach as defense.
Oh, yes.
In that Blanchfield fight, there was a point where Blanchfield did manage to push her into the cage, and then she just punched her 4 times in the face while Fiorot just stood there staring at her.
Yep.
How is this happening?
They also traded a shitload of jabs, almost every time in at least one of those rounds that Fiorot stepped in, Blanchfield just jabbed with her, and they would just both connect.
Yeah.
She comes in super hard and heavy on that front foot and shoots out a jab, which is a powerful, effective jab, but there is not much of the positional fighter in it.
Yeah. And so I think I'm actually going to pick the incredible evolution of Shevchenko and the skills that she's learned late in her career to being the deciding force for me in this one. She's still actually quite a big hitter. And even though, I don't expect her to mix it up with Fiorot, and there's a solid chance that if she does, she just hates it and stops trying to do it completely, and then just goes back. There's a very big chance that if she gets into trouble in this fight, she'll just start spamming takedowns until she gets knackered or something. This is the other remarkable thing about Shevchenko, is that to this day, we've never really seen what happens to her in a really bad fight.
Yeah.
None of this kind of stuff it's always just her fighting to bring the fight back to that edge of control.
Yep.
It's never, how does she come back when things are going really badly? We've literally never seen it. I guess we have in Nunes 1.
Yeah. And she did, mentioning that Holly Holm fight, she did get immediately dropped by Holly Holm in that fight. People forget that part. But in the first round, Holly Holm put her down, and, she's pretty good at remaining within herself and staying calm and restabilizing. You got to give her that.
Yeah, you're right. I maybe underrating her a little bit in terms of how resilient she is at getting back to her game.
Yeah, but she was totally collapsing by the end of that first Nunes fight. I mean, she was getting cooked. That's the only time we've really seen that.
Oh, no, it's the other. I mean, Nunes was the one who was in trouble.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. I'm completely reversing it in my brain.
Shevchenko got smoked in round 1.
That's right.
And then, but that was also one of the things where, even when Nunes is absolutely knackered in round 3, you still can't actually put your foot down.
That's right. How could I have misremembered that? It's one of the formative moments of Shevchenko's career and my hatred for her.
But yeah, I think that as much as this is not historically Shevchenko's game, I think her ability to enter will actually slow Fiorot's game down, pace down in a way that most other people haven't, because they've been, as you said, terrible level change takedown threats, or simply not physically capable of taking her down. And I think Shevchenko will actually be able to lower her pace.
Yeah.
And I think that once that happens, it's hard to think of Fiorot as being actually a very good fighter.
I know. Yeah, I think probably Fiorot's pace will be limited from the get-go, actually, if I had to guess. I think this is just one of those matchups where, the fighter tells themselves, I know that she's going to try to slow the fight down, and I'm not going to let it happen. And then she goes in there and she's like, this is uncomfortable. Every time I make a move forward, she steps backwards in a very threatening way, which is take that one more step in. I mean, that really is, even before this brilliant discovery of the idea that threats could be combined, that she made in her last fight, that has been such a rock solid part of Shevchenko's game that has just mentally destroyed everyone she's fought, is that she is ruthless in her management of distance. I do respect that about her game. She really, really, really pays attention to the space between herself and her opponent. Every time you make a move, she adjusts to stay at the range where she's comfortable. Even if you move back, she'll adjust and move forward, get right back to that range. She is extremely diligent with distance management. And that's the thing, I just think Fiorot has been allowed to push her pace because she's not particularly averse to getting hit. So everyone else she's fought, their solution is oh, she's coming in, I'm going to hit her back, and they frequently succeed. When she's punching, she is not defensively sound. Her chin flies up in the air. She squares herself up. She flings really goofy wide punches. She's one of these boxers whose form deteriorates exponentially the deeper she gets into a combination. Mm-hmm. But yeah, everyone else has this understanding that the way to dissuade a fighter from pushing a pace on you is to scare them. And, maybe there's a fighter out there powerful enough to actually have that effect on Fiorot, but it hasn't been any of the ones she's already fought. The solution is not to scare her. And Shevchenko may, if she lands a big counter or hits her with a big takedown and mauls her a bit on the ground or whatever. But up to that point, she is simply going to frustrate Fiorot, something which no opponent has even attempted to do. What if I don't let you fight?
Yeah. That's the other thing about, divergently large fighters, is that they tend to have really bad footwork and control of space in that way, because, again, they've never had it to learn it.
Right.
I suspect that Fiorot has just kind of learned to walk around after people like the Terminator.
Yes.
Until eventually she gets the fight that she wants.
Yeah. And she's a southpaw with a jab, so she's got an extra easy way of touching the vast majority of MMA fighters, while also having, a reach, which completely, overpowers most of theirs. But, this is the thing, like, Shevchenko will just impose a game of chicken on you. And almost no one she's ever fought has been able to stay the course and not make the mistake. And if they do, they're usually like shitty enough that she can still just pick up a horrible decision at that range, or like the Nunes rematch, nothing at all happens and somebody gets a decision because we don't like draws. But that's her superpower. That's what completely mentally destroys almost everybody she faces. And I suppose the one other fight to consider would be that first Shevchenko-Grasso fight. And obviously Valentina has adapted since then. For the first time possibly in her entire career, she has adapted and added to her game. But that was a fight where an opponent was really, really persistent in pressuring on forcing Shevchenko to.
It was also an opponent who could burst through space.
Yes, and a fairly clean combination puncher as well, compared to Fiorot.
We were talking someone who could be at the range that Shevchenko likes, who could then come through it very quickly, like throwing combinations.
Yeah. And also, it has to be said, somebody who, despite it looking like a pretty good game plan, and a really admirable attempt, was probably en route to losing a decision, if not for the submission in round 5.
Yep.
She is genuinely tough to fight, she's just so disciplined. Sometimes to her own detriment, but usually just to our frustration. It usually is not, she's usually not too restrained to actually win the fight. Like almost never. It's just, you want to see her do more and she refuses because this is the game she plays. And she's going to play it by gum no matter what you say, no matter what the opponent does. Try to crack it. And, I can't pick Fiorot against that. I don't know. I mean, we are certainly at a point where, Shevchenko is undoubtedly aging. Even gods must age eventually. And who knows how much longer she'll be at the top, but I think I can't expect Fiorot to have any good idea of how to handle her. I just can't. I don't think she's proven to be particularly adaptable in any way against all the opponents she's fought till now. She kind of has the same fight, and most of them just aren't very clever opponents. And they can't figure out how to get out of that fight. Shevchenko's going to make it hard for her to get into it in the first place.
The only sort of thoughtful fighter she's really gone up against was Namajunas, who A, hasn't been looking great, and B, broke her hand and still was kind of winning at the end. Kind of, yeah. She certainly staged an impressive comeback, having like snapped her pinky finger off in the first 30 seconds of the bout. Yeah. Yeah. And again, like, Namajunas is not the mental titan that Shevchenko is. She does not have that kind of discipline. She kept trying to outfight Fiorot as well. She couldn't stop having exchanges with her. And Fiorot is just looking for that step in. Like, no matter what you do, you step in, she's going to slap you with that crazy right hook she throws. And then poke and prod with the jabs and the side kicks as long as you're at range while pressuring you. And it compels most people to get crazy and to mix it up with her. And I just think she's in for a rude awakening with Valentina just not caring about what Valentina has the exact same understanding as Fiorot as far as like Fiorot's counter game goes,
where it's like the step in is the dangerous thing. So you just don't get to have that unless I'm absolutely sure I've got the ticket. Otherwise, you're not getting in. It's all about,
I agree.
Other fighters could genuinely learn from Valentina in that regard. Like she rarely has to make like big dynamic movement. It's all preventative footwork. It's reading the opponent's intentions at long range and making a series of very small adjustment steps to maintain that range. Rarely does she have to like bail out or cut some kind of clever angle because she is just keeping a grip on the position from the jump. It's exhausting.
If nothing else, she is control incarnate.
Yes. So we'll see. Maybe Fiorot can surprise us, and I'm not sure I would love having Fiorot as the reigning champion, especially because it would almost certainly mean an immediate rematch with Valentina. But
yes.
Maybe she can surprise us. Maybe she's just big enough. Maybe she can make effective use of that reach advantage to kind of mess with the normal parameters of Shevchenko's game. But I just think it's going to be a very frustrating experience for her, as it is for pretty much everyone else who's ever fought Valentina Shevchenko.
Yep, agreed.
All right, well, that's the co-main event. Let's take one more break, and when we come back, what do you say we talk about Bo Nickel after this?
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, let's talk about Sandhagen versus Figueiredo. We are going to talk about the main event, but I actually want to talk about a far more important result first, Phil. Bo Nickel is a fraud. He's a goddamn fraud. He's been exposed. Nobody knew up until now that he was actually not an elite fighter, but now it has been revealed. And thank God we picked it correctly. We can crow till the cows come home about how we knew Rainier de Ritter.
We? We?
Yeah. We're always in agreement, Phil. Everybody knows that.
Didn't you pick Bo Nickel?
No. That would be insane.
I'm sure you picked Bo Nickel.
Oh, did you see what happened to him in the fight? Why would I have picked that guy? He sucks. Are you crazy?
I'm pretty sure you picked Bo Nickel, and you were saying, this guy is the future of the UFC.
Well, that doesn't...
This guy is going to be the next big thing. He is John Jones, Jose Aldo, GSP, and all the other greats put together into one sensational package. There's no way he's going to lose this fight. I'm pretty sure I was the only one who actually picked the Dutch sensation that I keep mispronouncing the name of. How is it? Is it Renier? Rainier?
I have a hard time thinking that it's Rainier because, as I understand, the IJ diphthong makes the I sound in Dutch, right?
He's got a J in his name?
No. I'm saying he doesn't. I think the way to make the I sound in Dutch is IJ, and EI...
Oh, so it's Renier de Ritter.
Maybe, because EI would be the I sound in German, but in Dutch I have to assume it's different because they already have a combination of letters for that sound. So I've been saying it Rainier de Ritter, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably right. But also, I feel like you're trying to deflect.
I didn't.
As one of the...
I didn't change the subject. You started talking about Dutch.
One of those who were relentlessly riding the Bo hype train, while the rest of us were over here in Realityville
now
saying that our man Derrida was going to get it done. Some of us were out here picking him to get him to win, not just win, but by finish. I said he was going to beat him up on the feet, and then Bo Nickel was going to panic shoot into submission. As it turned out, it didn't even get that far.
You and the other Derrida ride or dies, I believe you call yourselves.
Exactly.
Well, now, Phil...
There's got to be a good pun in there.
Yeah. Derrida or die?
Yeah.
Now, hypothetically, if I had picked Bo Nickel, I think you would have undermined your point just now, because anybody who knows me knows I would not have picked him with so much praise, and I certainly, in this hypothetical world, which didn't happen, I certainly would not have been saying he's the next GSP and yada, yada, yada. I know you're trying to emphasize how wrong you mistakenly believe I was by saying all this, but
it's okay, Connor. We all fall for hype trains every now and again.
I mean, look what happened, Phil. How stupid would I have to be to have picked that guy to win? Am I that stupid? Don't answer that question. Let's talk about what happened in the fight. Yeah, I thought, Renier de Ridder is an incredibly hittable man. This was definitely one of those where I had already started to kind of come around to the possibilities when I talked about this with Zane the day after you and I recorded. Mm-hmm. And I was like, de Ridder is so hittable and everything, but he is actually like very aggressive on the feet. And is Bo Nickel going to be...
He just does a ton of stuff, right?
Yeah. Is Bo Nickel going to be comfortable with that? I don't know. But it's just hard to imagine that he would not just get walloped by some big shot from Bo Nickel. Turns out, I mean, he ate a few, but Bo Nickel has so many pieces missing as a functional MMA fighter that there just was like very little time for him to actually set his feet and do anything significant. And when he did try and it didn't work, he was then in a drastically worsened position and had to start fighting for his life. I mean, even in the first round, when this wasn't going completely sideways for Bo Nickel the entire time, as soon as the fight started, I was like, oh, Bo's he's not gonna look good here. De Ridder is putting a lot of pressure on him. He's fighting him with all the confidence of a guy who knows that wherever the fight goes, he knows what he's doing, which in some corners is called an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Bo Nickel did not have that feeling right from the jump. It was...
Yeah, the second they clinched up and Nickel's just... he's got an underhook and he's like reaching under the leg, and it's just one of these things where you need to convert this into a takedown or a dominant position immediately, but instead he just starts aimlessly pushing into the fence, and de Ridder just immediately starts trying to control him and just throwing in strikes. Every moment that they're in the clinch where he's got free space, he's just throwing strikes at him. And you can tell that Nickel's takedown game is not, Nickel's wrestling game is not magically translating to MMA,
right?
Because every time de Ridder is throwing, especially when he's throwing the knees when they've to the exposed body, he's risking getting taken down. This is if you think of Islam and his tendency for him to knee people, and then he waits for them to try and knee him back, and then he immediately puts them on their back.
Right.
But de Ridder is simply happy to just throw in transitional offense at all times because he's already confident that he's not going down for it.
Yeah, including going for several really stupid looking outer reap throws, which were not set up in any way. They, even if he had set them up, it did look like they weren't going to work, because that is just the base level of Bo Nickel's wrestling. That you try to throw him, his feet remain on the ground. But that was certainly a big part of, I think, why this fight went so well for de Ridder, is he was just very comfortable literally everywhere. trying everything he thought he could think of to try everywhere the fight went. And that put a kind of nonstop pressure on Bo Nickel, even when he was like nominally controlling positions that he could not sustain.
Yep. He
Yeah.
just kept throwing, and I think eventually Bo Nickel just wanted him to get away.
Yep.
You know, he couldn't control him by staying on top of him. He got swept. He did also try a completely insane guillotine, which, given who Bo Nickel is, you could either say was, if you were taking the this is Bo Nickel, before this fight view, you would call overconfidence. But if you were looking at it from like how this fight was going, you would probably call it panic.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I need to do something to stop this guy, the grappling equivalent of starting to only throw giant haymakers.
Yeah. Yeah. Which he also fell into doing on the feet very quickly. I mean, and granted, that's kind of all he ever does on the feet. But, yeah, I think, I think we've already talked a great deal, around the Bo Nickel subject, of the comparison between him and the obvious middleweight prospect counterpart of Chris Weidman. But this fight really kind of laid bare how, simply having the same like pre-MMA credentials, more or less, as a Chris Weidman does not make one guaranteed to achieve Chris Weidman's success. It really underscores how much of a prodigy Chris Weidman really was for MMA in particular. The story is well known that he went to help out the Cerro Longo fighters with their wrestling, and within 3 months was winning that Grappler's Quest tournament. All 13 bouts he fought submission wins, But also, as soon as Chris Weidman was fighting MMA, there was a sense of control in every area of the game in his style. He clearly understood on a basic level, like how to pressure, how to cut off the cage. He had an intuitive sense for when like a moment of danger would occur. The opponent is cooking something up, and I'm going to hard counter him and put the fight back in my wheelhouse. Like, it was instinctive, I think, MMA for Chris Weidman in a very real way. He just could feel the ebb and flow of a fight and direct it, even well before he developed the skills that would ultimately carry him to the title. And on the other hand, with Bo Nickel, it was very, very clear in that Paul Craig fight, which is why we mocked his rationalization so heartily, that he did not have a feel for any part of the game that was not wrestling, and consequently didn't even have a feel for how to wrestle in MMA, because all the other pieces were missing. That guillotine was certainly a great example of that, because he rushed it so bad. I'm trying to think of what happened. I think, he took De Ridder down, and De Ridder immediately started just chaining submission attacks off of his back. Like Bo Nickel was trying to posture up and land strikes, and De Ridder immediately got wrist control and tried to throw up a triangle underneath one of the punches. Classic MMA grappling counter to ground and pound. And Bo postured out of that, and then as soon as he came back down to the guard, De Ridder was turning for an armbar, and Bo postured out of that, but then De Ridder was like inverting and working on a single. Scrambles were happening. Things were not under control. And he was like, aha, I've got his neck. And in desperation, went for a guillotine without recognizing that De Ridder had already like contained the leg he needed to throw over his back to offer any threat at all with the guillotine. Because he was looking for that single. He'd already gotten that leg, and so Bo dropped for the guillotine basically into side control. because, and there was a bizarre scramble where DeRitter had to like use the fence to put his feet on the fence to stabilize, but at no point, even when Bo Nickel was on top on the ground, was there a real sense that he was controlling the exchanges. And that was definitely a sign of what was to come as the fight entered round 2. Yeah. And because of all of this panic and everything, he was clearly exhausted. And DeRitter just went right back to pressuring him. Still trying stupid shit in the clinches. He tried that throw again, and Bo Nickel. I mean, this is the other thing. Like, even when DeRitter failed in some of his attempts,
he was making mistakes. They were not there to be capitalized on.
And Bo Nickel, like, he got, when he went for that throw again, and Bo, like limp armed out of it and got a rear waist cinch on him. It was so clear that there was he needed a moment of relief in that position. He did not immediately start doing what you would expect a wrestler to do, which is dragging the guy forward, upsetting his balance, using this, what should be a very strong position of control, to take over. He got a body lock, and he was like, okay. And in that time, already, DeRitter was just like, I'm going to spin out of this, get my whizzer, go back to the knees. He just kept flowing. He would not settle in any position, as Bo Nickel clearly needed him to do. And I don't think it's an accident that it was immediately after hysterically failing on a throw attempt that DeRitter then began finishing Bo Nickel ruthlessly. Immediately after that hilarious mistake. Because it didn't yield the relief that Bo Nickel needed it to. In fact, it turned right back into a fight. I gotta say, DeRitter's clinch work was pretty cool.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
It wasn't just a showing up of Bo Nickel. This was a bit of a revelation that, this guy has kind of a clinch game. He was really insistent on getting good head position to create the space for his knees, and his wrist control was really interesting. It strongly reminded me of some of the moves that John Jones was pulling in that Glover Teixeira fight. He kept getting
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting wrist control with the left and then passing it off to the hand that he was whizzering Bo Nickel with on the other side, that kind of cross arm wrist control, and then working him with the left hand and firing knees up the hole in the middle. Pretty neat stuff.
Yeah. Also a little bit Chito Vera. But yeah, I think Ryan Wagner was talking about some of the John Jones comparators. He was saying this is just a very functional tall man clinch.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Bo was not taking the approaches that you would want a shorter man. That he wasn't, looking to use his head. He wasn't, looking to control up against the cage like Cain Velasquez would.
Yep.
He was, mostly just trying to get underneath, having an underhook on one side, and then just trying to attack the legs.
Yep.
And that's very hard to do when your opponent is taller than you.
Which just led to him, leaning forward and just offering his body as a target for those knees.
Yep.
So you don't see, there's a lot of double underhooking in Muay Thai, shorter fighters. Sanchai, of course, loves the body lock. That isn't how you do it in a striking clinch. You don't grab the guy's body and then lean forward, because it's not wrestling. That offers a target. You usually want to be as close as possible. And not to say there's never an opportunity for a more wrestling approach to a body lock in MMA, but the other stuff is liable to happen too. You have to be aware of it. And at no point was Bo able to build any kind of sequence of techniques together. Everything was in isolation, and then the fight just kept happening, and he was shocked by it.
Yeah, it's not even just Chris Weidman. You just look back at that. This is simply not what someone who's on the phenom track looks like in their fourth year. It's just not.
Yeah,
people can be that good. We're not saying it's not saying that, because a lot of people are oh, he's just inexperienced. He hasn't been doing it for long enough. That's understandable. He was fighting someone who was really good. He just doesn't look like that kind of fighter. He just isn't that kind of fighter. It's very clear. I think Miguel Class pointed out in a reply when I was saying something like this on Twitter. He was like, Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen had that fight with Yuri Alcantara that was basically 4 years into his pro MMA career.
Yep.
Piotr Jan is in the UFC. He's had 2 fights with Magomedov.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch Piotr Jan against Magomedov and then watch any Bo Nickel fight.
Right.
And be like, that's what someone on the Phenom track looks like in their 4th year.
Yeah, Max Holloway
was was at the early part of his streak that would take him to the title. He was absolutely thrashing Andre Fili at that point.
Yeah.
In a way that when you looked at it, you were like, that is a future champion.
Yeah.
It is 100% a future champion I am looking at. And Bo Nickel, he just simply didn't pass the eye test.
Even guys who had more hiccups and a much longer road to the UFC, like Conor McGregor, you can still see that there's something special about Conor McGregor in some of his earliest fights. There's a lot of stuff he clearly doesn't know, some gaping holes in his game, but you can see this man has a feel and an enthusiasm for what's happening in the cage that Bo Nickel doesn't seem to have. Now, this is not to say that this couldn't be a very useful, instructive defeat for Bo. Right? Like, the man is a great athlete. He was a great wrestler. It's quite possible that he really did need a severely humbling loss like this, and maybe it will change the way he approaches his training.
I will say, in response to this, I've seen him talking about this since then, and he has reacted as well as you could possibly hope. Again, you can't tell whether it's people told him to say that or whatever, but,
right.
A lot of people wouldn't do that even if the people around them told them to. But he's essentially just saying, I realized how inexperienced I am. He was just more well-rounded than me. He was just a better fighter than me.
Yeah.
I would like to get back in there. It's just a question. He might just be a guy who realizes that he has to compete and he really, really hates losing. And he might have been sort of approaching his training in a way where he was minimizing losing in training because he hates losing. But then he might have realized now that, he has to get his ass kicked in training because getting his ass kicked in the cage in front of millions of people, all of whom seem to want him to lose, is much, much worse. So, it could be that kind of...
There was a bit of a Brock Lesnar feeling, wasn't there, watching him get hit by De Ridder? Has this man not, been getting hit in the gym? He's not reacting the way I would expect a fighter of any kind to react. I'm not the only one to have made that comparison, but body shot KO aside, it did give me some Brock Lesnar, Alistair Overeem vibes, or even Brock when he fought fucking Kane, or even very early in his career when he was winning the fights and coming through the tough spots, he was panicking whenever he got touched, and there's definitely a bit of that to Bo Nickel. I think you might be onto something, because Brock Lesnar famously, at least it's a famous rumor that he did not really put himself through the ringer in the striking segments of his training.
Yeah, but even if Bo Nickel does change his training up, and he throws him, so he gets as much experience as he can. He stops fighting, pretty much once per year, fights more often. He's not that young, and he hasn't improved that quickly. So the most optimistic trajectories for him are still that he's going to get the shit kicked out of him a few more times. He just doesn't look like a natural.
No. My feeling is that he's not gonna come through. These are not the signs that you want to see from somebody in a moderately good division.
And if he does come through, I suspect it will be because underneath all this stuff, there's an incredibly hard, determined championship mind, and it eventually forces him through, multiple bad losses. And I would say, maybe he wins he gets to the top of an aging middleweight division.
Yeah.
When he's 33, 34, 35, and he puts it all together agonizingly, piece by piece, and manages to go on a streak, and then immediately falls off because he's now shot to pieces after training really hard for basically his entire career. That is, I would think, the optimistic case for Bo Nickel. And the pessimistic case is obviously that he simply never makes it and or retires.
Yeah.
Again, look at Piotr Jan 4 years into his career. This man made it to a UFC title and then immediately lost it. And never regained it. That's what an actual phenom looks like, and that's how hard it was.
Yeah. Yeah, Henry Cejudo was out there sharing his condolences and comparing this to the hiccups in his early UFC career. And it's true. Henry Cejudo went in there, fought Demetrius Johnson, and got blown out of the fucking water and had to seriously reevaluate all the shit he had kind of been ignoring about MMA training up to that point. On the other hand, Henry Cejudo got to a title shot with Demetrius Johnson, ignoring tons of shit because a lot of his fights turned into crazy, stupid brawls that were ugly and close. And he was just the man is willpower incarnate. He just did not let it put him off. And this is a guy who didn't develop any striking defense at all, which led to him just getting hit in the face a ton and just marching through to win those fights anyway. So even there's, I think, a far cry between what we've seen from Bo Nickel and other people who had to make serious course corrections. Most of them got much farther or made those changes much earlier in their career and then started a track where they were just looking increasingly at home in the cage. And I would love to say I certainly saw a result like this coming based on that Paul Craig fight and even the ones before that he was winning easily. I was I am not convinced this guy, but it's still kind of funny. It was Rainier de Ridder who was the one to just completely obliterate Bo Nickel, this goofy fucking Dutch submission grappler, just blowing him apart with knees in the clinch.
It was very funny.
All right. Well, I think that will have to do it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. I will admonish you, as I did last week, and at the top of the episode, in fact, to check out patreon.com/heavyhands. There will be some bonus material from this episode, a couple of undercard fights here from UFC 315, and probably our conversation about Sandhagen Figueiredo as well will be in that bonus episode. So check it out over there. We appreciate your support. We hope you enjoy it. And let's see. We've got anything on the horizon. Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales. That does not inspire confidence. That sounds like an Apex main event to me. And yes, it is. Well,
who could have guessed?
Paul Craig, Adolfo Bellato.
Oh, boy. Oh, yeah, we are so back. We are so back in the Apex.
Oh, my God.
It's like we never left.
Well, fortunately, that comes on the heels of a pay-per-view, so next week we will almost certainly be talking exclusively about UFC 315. We can only hope the results are interesting enough on their own to warrant that, even without an abysmal Apex card to follow. But until then, please find us on social media at King Typo and at Boxing Bush and at Evil Greg Jackson. Those are our handles on Twitter. You can find me on Blue Sky at King Typo. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.